Welcome to Kaleidoscope. Let's talk. Since their partition in 1947, India and Pakistan have clashed over territory, ideology, and national identity, with Kashmir at the heart of it all. Today, rising nationalism and strategic shifts are adding new layers to this old conflict, making informed analysis more crucial than ever. Today we are joined by the Director of the Center for Law and Security Studies, Nilanthan Niruthan, a leading political analyst known for his deep insight into South Asian geopolitics and conflict resolution. His work explores the complex realities between protracted regional tensions, including one of the world's most enduring rivalries, that between India and Pakistan. We've been seeing the current escalation of tension between India and Pakistan. Has this been simmering and waiting to erupt, or has it just come up out of the blue?
So it's certainly been simmering for a long time. So as you know, this is a civilizational conflict in many ways as well, with Kashmir just being the modern political incarnation of this. And on top of that, Kashmir has also been a very vibrant hub of tourism for India over the last 2 or 3 years. Last year, there was something like 4.5 million tourists who went to Kashmir. So for the troublemakers on either side who want this conflict to continue, they have a vested interest in ensuring that Kashmir does not see peace. So there was never going to be long-term peace in the way that we would define it. So ordinary Kashmiris still have normalcy in their lives in a way that they did not have, let's say, 5 years ago or 10 years ago. But these one-off terror attacks will continue to happen, and that kind of stuff will always be simmering under the surface.
So is this sort of more of a broader regional trend, or are we going to see it snapped up and finished?
It's part of a broader regional trend. So right now we are seeing war breaking out between Pakistan and Afghanistan. We are seeing Pakistan having to use a lot of military force against its own Balochistan province. We are seeing Myanmar that's already exploded into civil war and a lot of bloodshed and infighting and factions and all that there. So the South Asian picture itself shows us that there are many civilizational conflicts brewing from one end of South Asia to the other. So in that sense, I would fit this in as part of that larger equation.
What is the impact this is going to have on smaller nations in this region? We're talking about Nepal and Bangladesh and Maldives, Sri Lanka.
The first major thing is the economic fallout of this, because globally with Trump's tariffs, with the countermeasures against it, we are heading towards a global recession of some kind. Secondly, this area is also prone to a lot of destabilization because of all of these national civilizational conflicts there, which ensures that the business climate and the investment climate is never as good as it would be in, let's say, Southeast Asia, for instance. And we've also got to remember that in terms of air travel, in terms of shipping lanes, South Asia is a very key pivot. So if war breaks out between India and Pakistan, for example, what happens to the air traffic that flows through that entire region? What if that's brought to a standstill? So the smaller nations here have the most to lose from the regional and international situation crumbling. And in that sense, we will be the first victims.
Would Sri Lanka be forced to take a side?
I hope not. But once again, I don't think India and Pakistan are looking for us to pick sides here. I think they're a lot more worried about where the global powers like Washington and Beijing and Moscow are positioned. I don't think either India or Pakistan are actively looking to pressure Sri Lanka and Nepal and the Maldives and all that into picking a side. If we are pushed into it, we would be forced to take India's side, but I hope we are not pushed into it, because we gain nothing out of burning a bridge with Pakistan.
Do you think there are external influences, like you mentioned, from the US, from Russia, from China?
There are certain external influences, but most of the theories that I've seen seem to be completely blown out of proportion. Once again, as I said, the idea of the Hindu versus Muslim cultural identity in South Asia, this is a civilizational struggle. It goes back over 1,000 years. And even the Kashmir issue itself predates Russia or China or the United States becoming actively involved in South Asia on a geopolitical basis at least. So even though these large powers will play a role, I see this as predominantly being an India-Pakistan issue.
So we're looking at an era where technology is used excessively almost in warfare. So could cyber warfare, also disinformation campaigns and hybrid tactics be playing a larger role, in fueling the fires, so to speak?
Certainly, and we've already seen disinformation playing such a huge role there, where the Indians have their narrative, the Pakistanis have their narrative, and now you have these huge social media cells and proxy warfare cells who are dedicated towards pushing their own narrative and towards discrediting the other nation's narrative. So if you were a pro-Pakistan group, you would want to show that India is a tyrannical power in Kashmir and is oppressing ordinary Kashmiris. And if you belong to the Indian side of the argument, it would be, look at how evil Pakistan does not want Kashmir to go back to being normal. So you have both sides accusing each other of subterfuge, of warmongering and all that. And in terms of what you mentioned as a hybrid tactics, this is entirely hybrid warfare. What we're seeing right now, using the media, using regular military force, using terrorist organizations, using narratives, all as one compounded strategy. That's hybrid warfare in a nutshell. And we're seeing that play out right in front of our eyes.
Is this salvageable diplomatic wise?
I would personally say not, because once again, not to keep flogging a dead horse, but I believe that this all comes down to a civilizational power struggle. So I don't see modern diplomatic mechanisms that have been set up in the last 50 or 60 years at most being able to solve this. It runs much, much deeper than that. The world right now is also in a state of flux where there are no international organizations, there are no countries with the mediating power to bring this to an end. So I don't see that being an option either.
Nationalist policies in both countries, how much is this influencing the escalation?
I'm not too sure how much it would influence the escalation, because I would hope that the escalation would be based on strategy. But what is striking is that the powers that be on both sides benefit a lot from a state of tension and warmongering. So, for instance, the Pakistani army is currently the most unpopular it's ever been, especially with the jailing of Imran Khan, who's the most popular politician there, to the point where many people accuse the Pakistani army of now helping an undemocratic government stay in power. So they need something to rally everybody. They are already at war with Afghanistan, they are at war in Balochistan. So in terms of capacity and popularity rather, they are at an all-time low. They need to bring everybody together. And on the Indian side, you have the BJP government, which, let's face it, the next election that comes up, it's very unlikely that Narendra Modi is going to be the candidate. So you no longer have his personal charisma to the election campaign. You've got to bring in some unknown factor. And just in terms of keeping a cohesive force going, alienating the opposition parties there, the BJP benefits enormously from this. So the major power holders on both sides, which is the BJP in India and the Pakistani army in Pakistan, both of them become more popular because of escalating tensions. And that's the issue here.
So what's the human cost of this escalation thus far, both in terms of civilian casualties and also displacement?
Right from when the Kashmir issue began, the civilian casualties in the millions, partition itself saw about 2 to 3 million people dead, about 20 million people being displaced. So when we look at the bigger picture here, we're talking about tens of millions of people having been affected over the last 80 years from this. Here, of course, this particular local terror attack, there were about 24 civilians who were massacred. And you have lots of people in Kashmir who've been affected by the counter operations and things like that. So if we were to put an actual number on it, and if we were to look at this in totality, we are talking about a conflict that has affected tens of millions of people.
Looking ahead, what scenarios do you see, Nilanthan? Is there a path towards de-escalation? Is there a path towards peace, for instance? Or are we witnessing the early stages of a longer-term standoff?
The only two realistic options are de-escalation or some kind of armed confrontation. The second option that you mentioned, peace, I would say is not even in consideration because it's just such a complex picture which involves so many centuries of history that peace in the near future, I would say, is kind of impossible. But de-escalation, one hopes, is the way that both countries go. If you look at the discourse over the first week of the attack, it was all about warmongering over and over again. Whereas it's still in a warmongering tone at the moment, but the tone has certainly become a little more mellow, so to speak, as common sense prevails. But on the other hand, all it takes is a small misstep somewhere in this de-escalation process for all-out war to break out. Particularly when, as we just discussed earlier, powerful people on both sides of the border benefit from prolonging tensions. One blunder could mean that a very fruitful de-escalation process just completely shatters and we go into an armed confrontation.
It's looking bleak, but I'm hoping good sense will prevail.
Likewise.
Here's a reminder that Kaleidoscope is on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Don't forget to subscribe, follow, and like us for more.